Sarah wiped her hands on her apron as she watched the clock strike 7 in the morning. The small diner where she worked was already filling with the usual crowd of construction workers, office employees, and retirees who made this place their second home. But among all the regular faces, there was one customer who stood out to her the most every single day without fail. An elderly man in his 70s would shuffle through the front door at exactly 7:15. His name was Mr. Henderson, though most people just called him the quiet old man who sat in the corner booth. He always wore the same faded brown jacket, regardless of the weather, and carried a worn leather wallet that looked like it had seen better decades. Sarah had been working at the diner for almost 2 years, and in all that time Mr. Henderson had never missed a day. Rain or shine, holidays or weekdays, he would make his way to booth number 7 and order the exact same thing. 1 cup of black coffee, no sugar, and a single piece of toast with butter on the side. Nothing more, nothing less. What struck Sarah most about Mr. Henderson was not just his unwavering routine, but the profound loneliness that seemed to surround him like a heavy coat. He never spoke to other customers, rarely made eye contact with anyone, and always ate his simple breakfast in complete silence. His hands would shake slightly as he lifted the coffee cup to his lips, and Sarah often noticed how he would make his small meal last nearly an hour, as if he had nowhere else to go. Other waitresses at the diner had grown tired of serving him. They complained that he never ordered anything expensive, left only small tips, and took up valuable table space during the busy morning rush. Some even suggested that the manager should encourage him to find somewhere else to eat. But Sarah felt differently about the old man. There was something in his eyes that reminded her of her own grandfather, who had passed away when she was 16. The same gentle sadness, the same quiet dignity that comes with age and loss. Sarah began to make sure she was always the one to serve Mr. Henderson, greeting him with a warm smile and making small attempts at conversation. At first, he would simply nod in response to her cheerful good mornings. But slowly, over the course of several weeks, Sarah noticed small changes. He would look up when she approached his table, and occasionally the corners of his mouth would lift in what might have been the beginning of a smile. Sarah started paying closer attention to the little details about Mr. Henderson. She noticed that his shoes were old but carefully polished, that he always folded his napkin neatly beside his plate when he finished eating, and that he would sometimes stare out the window with an expression of deep thought. Or remembering one particularly cold Tuesday morning, Sarah decided to do something different. When she brought Mr. Henderson his usual order, she also placed a small bowl of fresh fruit beside his plate. When he looked up at her with surprise, she simply said that it was on the house and that everyone needed a little extra nutrition on such a chilly day. For the first time since she had been serving him, Mr. Henderson spoke more than just his order. His voice was soft and slightly hoarse from disuse, but his words were clear. He thanked her for her kindness and mentioned that it had been a long time since anyone had shown him such thoughtfulness. That simple exchange marked the beginning of a routine that would become the highlight of both their days. Sarah would find small ways to brighten Mr. Henderson's morning, whether it was an extra pat of butter for his toast, a refill of coffee before he asked for it, or simply taking a moment to ask how he was feeling. As the days passed, Sarah began to learn more about the man behind the quiet exterior. She discovered that he was a widower who had lost his wife 3 years earlier, and that his daily visits to the diner were often the only human interaction he experienced. His children lived in distant cities, and old age had slowly stripped away most of his social connections. The other staff members started to notice the change in both Sarah and Mr. Henderson. The old man seemed less withdrawn, and Sarah approached his table with genuine enthusiasm rather than obligation. What had started as simple customer service was evolving into something much more meaningful, though neither of them fully understood just how profound this connection would become. Each morning, as Sarah prepared for another day at the diner, she found herself looking forward to seeing Mr. Henderson's familiar figure walk through the door. She had no way of knowing that her small acts of kindness were about to reveal a story that would change her life forever. As winter melted into spring, Sarah noticed subtle changes in Mr. Henderson that both warmed her heart and filled her with concern. The old man had begun to open up about his past, sharing small stories about his late wife Margaret and their 52 years of marriage. He would tell Sarah about the flower garden Margaret had tended behind their house, how she made the best apple pie in the neighborhood, and how they used to take long walks together every evening after dinner. But along with these precious memories came signs that worried Sarah deeply. Mr. Henderson's hands shook more noticeably now, and sometimes he would pause mid-sentence, looking confused or lost. There were mornings when he would order his usual breakfast but then forget to eat it, staring instead at some invisible point beyond the window. Sarah began to suspect that the old man was struggling with more than just loneliness. One rainy Thursday morning, Mr. Henderson surprised Sarah by asking if she had a few minutes to sit with him. The breakfast rush had died down and her manager was in the back office, so Sarah slid into the booth across from the elderly man. For the first time she noticed how thin he had become, how his jacket hung loose on his shrinking frame. Mr. Henderson reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, faded photograph. With trembling fingers he placed it on the table between them. The picture showed a young couple standing in front of a White House with a picket fence. The woman had dark hair and a bright smile, while the man looked remarkably like a younger version of Mr. Henderson. He told Sarah that this was the only photograph he carried with him everywhere he went. It was taken on the day he and Margaret bought their first home, just after returning from their honeymoon. They were both 24 years old and full of dreams about the life they would build together. Mr. Henderson's voice grew soft as he explained how they had planned to fill that house with children and laughter, how they had talked about growing old together on the front porch. Sarah listened intently as Mr. Henderson shared more intimate details of his life. He told her about the miscarriages Margaret had suffered, how they had eventually adopted 2 children who were now adults living across the country. He spoke about his career as a high school mathematics teacher, how he had loved watching young minds discover the beauty of numbers and equations, but then his story took a darker turn. Margaret had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease 8 years earlier. Mr. Henderson had cared for her at home for as long as possible, watching helplessly as the woman he loved slowly disappeared before his eyes. The last 3 years of her life were spent in a care facility, where Mr. Henderson visited every single day until the morning she passed away peacefully in her sleep after Margaret's death. Mr. Henderson found himself completely alone for the first time in over 5 decades. Their house felt too big and too quiet, filled with memories that brought both comfort and unbearable pain. His children called occasionally, but they had their own busy lives and families to worry about. The friends he and Margaret had shared gradually stopped visiting, leaving him isolated in his grief. That was when Mr. Henderson discovered the diner. He had been walking aimlessly through the neighborhood one morning, feeling lost and purposeless, when he saw the warm lights and heard the gentle clatter of dishes and conversation. Something about the place reminded him of the small cafe where he and Margaret used to have breakfast on Sunday mornings during their early years of marriage. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes as she listened to Mr. Henderson's story. She realized that his daily visits to the diner were much more than just a meal routine. They were his lifeline to human connection, his way of feeling like he still mattered to someone in the world. Mr. Henderson carefully tucked the photograph back into his coat pocket and looked directly at Sarah. He told her that she had become the bright spot in his otherwise empty days, that her kindness had reminded him what it felt like to be seen and valued as a person rather than just another forgotten old man. From that day forward, Sarah felt a deeper sense of responsibility toward Mr. Henderson. She began arriving at work 15 minutes early to make sure everything was perfect for his arrival. She memorized exactly how he liked his coffee and toast, and she started keeping track of the stories he told her so she could ask follow-up questions about his memories. Sarah also began to notice things that troubled her even more. Sometimes Mr. Henderson would repeat the same story from just days earlier, having no memory of telling it before. Other times he would look around the diner with confusion, as if he had forgotten where he was or how he had gotten there. The signs were becoming impossible to ignore, and Sarah felt a growing fear about what might be happening to the kind old man, who had become such an important part of her daily routine. Summer brought longer days and busier mornings to the diner, but Sarah's attention remained focused on Mr. Henderson's declining condition. What had started as occasional forgetfulness was now becoming a daily struggle for the elderly man. Some mornings he would arrive at his usual time, but seem completely unaware of where he was or why he had come. Other days he would order his breakfast and then ask Sarah the same questions repeatedly. Never remembering her previous answers, the most heartbreaking moments came when Mr. Henderson would look at Sarah with genuine confusion, as if seeing her for the first time despite their months of daily interaction. During these episodes, he would study her face carefully and ask if they had met before. Completely forgetting the conversations and connections they had built together, Sarah began to research dementia and Alzheimer's disease during her breaks at work. She learned about the progression of memory loss, the confusion and disorientation that patients experience, and the importance of maintaining familiar routines and environments. This knowledge helped her understand what Mr. Henderson was going through, but it also filled her with a profound sadness about his future. Despite the challenges, Sarah remained committed to providing Mr. Henderson with the best care she could offer within the limitations of her role as a waitress. She developed strategies to help him feel more comfortable and secure during his visits. When he seemed confused, she would gently remind him of where he was and why he had come. When he repeated questions, she answered them patiently, each time as if hearing them for the first time. One particularly difficult Tuesday morning, Mr. Henderson arrived at the diner in a state of severe agitation. His usually neat appearance was disheveled, his jacket was buttoned incorrectly, and he seemed to be searching frantically for something. When Sarah approached his table, he grabbed her arm with surprising strength and asked desperately if she had seen Margaret. Sarah's heart broke as she realized that Mr. Henderson was having one of his worst episodes yet. In his confused state, he believed that Margaret was still alive and that she was missing. Sarah gently guided him to his usual booth and brought him his coffee, speaking in soothing tones while trying to help him regain his composure. Over the next hour, Sarah watched as Mr. Henderson cycled through different levels of awareness. At times, he seemed to recognize her and understand where he was, but then confusion would cloud his eyes again, and he would ask about Margaret or wonder aloud why he couldn't find his way home. Other customers in the diner began to take notice of the situation. Some looked on with sympathy, while others seemed uncomfortable with the elderly man's obvious distress. Sarah's manager approached her during a quiet moment and expressed concern about the disruption Mr. Henderson was causing. He suggested that maybe it was time to contact someone about the old man's welfare. This conversation forced Sarah to confront a reality she had been avoiding. Mr. Henderson was clearly no longer able to live safely on his own, yet he seemed to have no family support system in place. His children lived far away, and Sarah had never seen anyone else check on his well-being or accompany him to the diner. That afternoon, after Mr. Henderson had finally calmed down and returned home, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She looked up his address in the phone book and decided to visit his house after her shift ended. She knew she was crossing professional boundaries, but her concern for his safety had grown too strong to ignore. When Sarah arrived at Mr. Henderson's address, she was shocked by what she discovered. The small house that she had imagined as a cozy home was actually in a state of serious neglect. The yard was overgrown with weeds, newspapers were piled up on the front porch, and several windows had cracks that had been covered with tape. Sarah knocked on the front door and waited nervously for a response. When Mr. Henderson finally answered, he looked at her with the same confusion she had seen at the diner earlier that day. He didn't recognize her at all and asked suspiciously why she was at his house. As Sarah tried to explain who she was, she caught glimpses of the interior of his home through the partially open door. What she saw alarmed her even more than his condition at the diner. The house appeared to be filled with clutter and trash. There was a strong smell of spoiled food, and she could see dirty dishes stacked high on every available surface. Mr. Henderson eventually seemed to remember who Sarah was, and his suspicious expression softened into the familiar gentle smile she knew so well. He invited her inside, apologizing for the mess and explaining that he had been meaning to clean up but kept forgetting to do it. Sarah spent the next 2 hours helping Mr. Henderson tidy up his living room and kitchen. As they worked together, she learned more about his daily struggles than he had ever revealed at the diner. He had stopped cooking regular meals because he would forget food on the stove and nearly start fires. He had trouble remembering to pay bills, take medications, or maintain basic hygiene routines. Most troubling of all, Mr. Henderson confided that he sometimes woke up in the middle of the night completely disoriented, unable to remember where he was or how to find his way back to his bedroom. He had fallen several times trying to navigate his own house in the darkness, and Sarah could see old bruises on his arms that confirmed these accidents. As Sarah prepared to leave that evening, Mr. Henderson thanked her for her help and kindness, but she could see the fear in his eyes as night approached, and she realized that leaving him alone in that house felt like abandoning someone who desperately needed help. Sarah spent a sleepless night thinking about Mr. Henderson alone in his deteriorating house. By morning, she had made up her mind to take action, even though she wasn't sure exactly what that meant. She arrived at work early and waited anxiously for his usual 7:15 arrival, praying that he would show up safely. When Mr. Henderson walked through the diner door that morning, Sarah felt a mixture of relief and renewed concern. He looked even more disheveled than the day before, and there was a fresh scrape on his forehead that suggested another fall during the night. His jacket was inside out, and he seemed to be moving more slowly than usual. As Sarah served him his breakfast, she noticed that he was having trouble performing simple tasks that had never been difficult before. He struggled to tear open the small butter packet, fumbled with his coffee cup, and seemed confused about how to use his fork properly. These small changes were heartbreaking evidence of how quickly his condition was progressing. During a quiet moment between customers, Sarah sat down across from Mr. Henderson and gently asked about the injury on his head. At first, he seemed unaware that he was hurt, touching his forehead with surprise when she mentioned it. Then, slowly, fragments of memory seemed to return, and he told her about falling in his hallway during the night. While trying to find the bathroom, Sarah realized that she couldn't continue to stand by and watch Mr. Henderson struggle alone any longer. She asked him if he had contact information for his children, explaining that she was worried about his safety and thought his family should know what was happening. Mr. Henderson looked confused by her question at first, but then seemed to remember something important. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a small piece of paper with 2 phone numbers, written in faded ink. These were the contact numbers for his son David, who lived in California, and his daughter Susan, who had moved to Florida several years earlier. Mr. Henderson explained that he hadn't spoken to either of them in many months because he didn't want to be a burden on their busy lives. That afternoon, after much internal debate, Sarah decided to call David Henderson. When a man answered the phone, Sarah introduced herself as someone who served his father breakfast every day and explained her concerns about his declining condition. The conversation that followed was both enlightening and deeply troubling. David Henderson was completely unaware of how severely his father's health had deteriorated. The last time they had spoken was during a brief phone call 3 months earlier, during which his father had sounded perfectly normal and assured him that everything was fine. David had been meaning to visit, but work commitments and family obligations had kept pushing the trip further into the future. As Sarah described the extent of Mr. Henderson's confusion, memory loss, and unsafe living conditions, she could hear the shock and guilt in David's voice. He had known that his father was getting older and might need help eventually, but he had no idea that the situation had become so serious so quickly. David explained that he and his sister had tried to convince their father to move to an assisted living facility after their mother died, But Mr. Henderson had been adamant about staying in the house where he had lived with Margaret for over 40 years. They had respected his wishes and assumed that he would ask for help if he needed it. Sarah learned that Mr. Henderson had been hiding his symptoms from his children during their infrequent phone conversations. He would call them only on his good days when his mind was clearer, and he would carefully avoid mentioning any of his struggles or confusion. His pride and desire to remain independent had prevented him from reaching out for the help he desperately needed. David promised Sarah that he would fly out immediately to assess his father's condition and explore care options. He thanked her repeatedly for calling and told her that her kindness toward his father meant more to their family than she could possibly understand. He also revealed something that brought tears to Sarah's eyes. According to David, Mr. Henderson had mentioned Sarah during their last phone conversation. He had told his son about a kind young woman at the diner who always made sure he felt welcome and cared for. Mr. Henderson had said that Sarah reminded him of his own daughter when she was younger, and that talking with her was the best part of his day. 2 days later, David Henderson arrived at the diner during the morning rush. Sarah recognized him immediately because he had his father's gentle eyes and kind expression. Though he looked much younger and healthier than the man she had been caring for over the past months, David introduced himself to Sarah and thanked her personally for everything she had done for his father. He explained that he had spent the previous day with Mr. Henderson, touring his house and talking with him about care options. The reality of his father's condition was even worse than Sarah's phone call had prepared him for. During their conversation, David revealed that he and his sister had made the difficult decision to move their father to a memory care facility near David's home in California. The facility specialized in caring for patients with dementia and Alzheimer's disease, and it would allow the family to be more involved in Mr. Henderson's daily care and medical treatment. Sarah felt a complex mixture of emotions as she listened to these plans. She was relieved that Mr. Henderson would finally receive the professional care he needed and have his family close by. But she was also heartbroken at the thought of losing her daily connection with the gentle old man who had become such an important part of her life. David assured Sarah that they would tell his father about the move gradually and gently, allowing him time to say goodbye to the places and people that had become important to him. He asked if Sarah would be willing to visit his father one more time before they left, explaining that Mr. Henderson had specifically asked about her and seemed worried that she might think he had abandoned her. The following Saturday, Sarah visited Mr. Henderson's house one final time. David had spent the week helping his father pack his belongings and prepare for the move to California. When Sarah arrived, she found the house in a much different condition than her previous visit. It was clean and organized, but there were boxes stacked everywhere and a profound sense of endings filled the air. Mr. Henderson was sitting in his living room when Sarah walked in, and for a moment his face lit up with genuine recognition and joy. He seemed to be having one of his clearer days, and he remembered exactly who she was and why she had come. He thanked her for visiting and apologized for any confusion he might have caused her over the past few weeks. As they sat together in his nearly empty living room, Mr. Henderson began to share stories and memories that Sarah had never heard before. He seemed to understand that this might be one of his last opportunities to communicate clearly, and he wanted to make sure she knew how much her friendship had meant to him during one of the most difficult periods of his life. Mr. Henderson told Sarah about the day he had first walked into the diner, feeling completely lost and wondering if anyone would notice if he simply disappeared from the world. He had been contemplating whether life was worth living without Margaret by his side, and the kindness Sarah showed him that first morning had literally saved his life. He explained that her daily smiles, gentle conversations, and small acts of caring had given him a reason to get up each morning. Even when his mind was confused about everything else, he somehow always remembered that Sarah would be waiting for him at the diner, ready to make him feel like he mattered. Sarah felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she listened to Mr. Henderson describe the impact she had unknowingly made on his life. She had thought she was simply being kind to a lonely old man, but she had actually been providing him with a lifeline during his darkest hours. Mr. Henderson then surprised Sarah by giving her a gift. He handed her a small wooden box that had belonged to Margaret, explaining that his wife had always kept her most treasured possessions inside it. He wanted Sarah to have it as a way of remembering their friendship and as a token of gratitude for everything she had done for him. Inside the box, Sarah discovered the faded photograph that Mr. Henderson had shown her at the diner, along with several other mementos from his marriage to Margaret. There was also a handwritten letter that Mr. Henderson had written to Sarah with David's help. In the letter, he tried to express his gratitude for her kindness and explained that meeting her had restored his faith in the goodness of people. The letter also contained something unexpected. Mr. Henderson revealed that he had been setting aside money from his social security checks for several months, creating a small fund that he wanted to give to Sarah to help her pursue her dreams. He had learned during their conversations that she was taking night classes at the community college, hoping to become a nurse someday. Sarah was overwhelmed by Mr. Henderson's generosity and tried to refuse the money, but both he and David insisted that she accept it. David explained that his father had very few people in his life who had shown him genuine care and compassion, and that giving Sarah this gift was one of the last meaningful decisions his father was able to make independently. As their visit drew to a close, Mr. Henderson walked Sarah to the front door of his house. For a moment, he seemed to forget about his condition and spoke with the clarity and wisdom of the high school teacher he had once been. He told Sarah that kindness was the most powerful force in the world, and that the compassion she had shown him would come back to her in ways she couldn't imagine. Mr. Henderson also shared some advice that would stay with Sarah for the rest of her life. He told her that everyone she met was fighting battles that she couldn't see, carrying burdens that she didn't understand, and hoping for someone to notice their struggles and offer them hope. He encouraged her to continue being kind to others, especially those who seemed forgotten or ignored by the rest of the world. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the diner to find Mr. Henderson's usual booth empty for the first time in nearly 2 years. David had driven his father to the airport early that morning for their flight to California. Sarah tried to focus on her other customers, but she found herself constantly glancing toward booth number 7, expecting to see Mr. Henderson's familiar figure throughout the day. Sarah thought about everything that had happened over the past few months. What had started as a simple customer service relationship had evolved into something much deeper and more meaningful. Mr. Henderson had taught her about the dignity and wisdom that comes with age, the devastating effects of loneliness and illness, and the profound impact that small acts of kindness can have on another person's life. Sarah also realized that Mr. Henderson had changed her in fundamental ways. She had always considered herself a caring person, but her relationship with him had shown her the true power of human connection and compassion. She began to approach her work and her interactions with others differently, always looking for opportunities to make someone feel seen, valued, and remembered. That evening, Sarah called David to make sure they had arrived safely in California. He reported that his father had handled the travel well and seemed to be adjusting to his new environment. David also promised to keep in touch with Sarah and let her know how his father was doing in his new care facility. As Sarah hung up the phone, she felt a mixture of sadness and gratitude. She was heartbroken to lose her daily connection with Mr. Henderson, but she was also profoundly grateful for the lessons he had taught her about life, aging, compassion, and the importance of human dignity. Little did she know that Mr. Henderson had one final surprise that would soon change her life in ways she never could have imagined. 3 weeks after Mr. Henderson's departure, Sarah was working her usual morning shift when she received an unexpected phone call. The voice on the other end belonged to a woman named Susan, who introduced herself as Mr. Henderson's daughter. Susan's voice was warm but emotional as she explained why she was calling. David had told Susan about Sarah's incredible kindness toward their father, and Susan wanted to share some news that would help Sarah understand the full extent of her impact on their family. Mr. Henderson had settled into his new care facility better than anyone had expected, and he was receiving excellent medical treatment for his dementia. but more importantly, Susan explained, their father had been talking about Sarah constantly since his arrival in California. Even as his memory continued to fade in other areas, his recollections of Sarah and their daily interactions remained remarkably clear and vivid. He would tell the nurses and other residents about the kind waitress who had made him feel special every single day. Susan then shared something that brought tears to Sarah's eyes. The memory care facility had encouraged families to bring in photographs and mementos that might help patients maintain connections to positive memories from their past. David had created a photo album for his father that included pictures from throughout his life with Margaret, but the photograph that Mr. Henderson treasured most was a picture that David had taken without Sarah's knowledge on his last day at the diner. It showed Sarah and Mr. Henderson sitting together in booth number 7, both of them smiling as they shared what would be their final conversation in that familiar setting. Mr. Henderson kept this photograph on his bedside table and would show it to anyone who visited him. He would tell them about Sarah's kindness, her gentle spirit, and how she had made him feel like he mattered during the loneliest period of his life, even when he forgot other important details. He never forgot Sarah's name or the way she had cared for him. Susan then shared news that completely overwhelmed Sarah with emotion. Mr. Henderson had been struggling with the advanced stages of his dementia for several weeks when something remarkable happened. During a particularly clear moment, he had asked David to help him write one final letter. In this letter, Mr. Henderson had asked his family to establish a scholarship fund in Sarah's name at the local community college where she was studying to become a nurse. He wanted to use the remainder of his savings to help other young people who were working hard to build caring careers but needed financial assistance to achieve their dreams. The scholarship would be called the Margaret and Harold Henderson Compassionate Care Scholarship, named after both Mr. Henderson and his late wife. It would specifically support students who were studying nursing or other healthcare fields and who had demonstrated exceptional kindness and compassion in their daily lives. Sarah was speechless as Susan explained the details of her father's final gift. The scholarship fund was substantial enough to not only pay for the remainder of Sarah's nursing education, but also to help several other students. Each year for many years to come, Mr. Henderson had wanted to ensure that his final act in life would be to support people who shared Sarah's commitment to caring for others, but the surprises didn't end there. Susan also revealed that Mr. Henderson had specifically requested that Sarah be involved in selecting future scholarship recipients. He wanted her to help identify students who demonstrated the same qualities of kindness and compassion that had meant so much to him during his time of need. A week later, Sarah received a formal letter from the community college, informing her that she had been awarded the inaugural Margaret and Harold Henderson Compassionate Care Scholarship. Along with the letter came a final note from Mr. Henderson, written with David's assistance during one of his last clear moments. In this final message, Mr. Henderson thanked Sarah one more time for showing him that kindness still existed in the world. He told her that their friendship had taught him that even in the darkest moments of life, there were still angels walking among us, bringing light and hope to those who needed it most. Mr. Henderson also expressed his hope that Sarah would carry forward the lessons they had learned together about the importance of seeing and valuing every person, especially those who might seem forgotten or invisible to the rest of the world. He encouraged her to remember that the smallest acts of kindness could have the most profound impacts on another person's life. 2 months later, Sarah graduated from nursing school with honors, thanks in large part to the scholarship that allowed her to focus on her studies without the financial stress she had been carrying. At her graduation ceremony, she carried the wooden box Mr. Henderson had given her, along with the photograph of them together in the diner. Sarah went on to specialize in geriatric nursing, working in memory care facilities where she could provide the same kind of compassionate care to other elderly patients that she had given to Mr. Henderson. She never forgot the lessons he had taught her about dignity, respect, and the power of human connection. Every year, Sarah participates in selecting new recipients for the Margaret and Harold Henderson Compassionate Care Scholarship. As she reviews applications and interviews candidates, she looks for the same qualities that Mr. Henderson had recognized in her: the ability to see beyond a person's circumstances to their fundamental humanity and worth. Sarah often thinks about the mysterious ways that life brings people together exactly when they need each other most. What had seemed like a simple job serving breakfast had become a profound lesson about love, loss, aging, and the incredible impact that one person can have on another's life. Mr. Henderson had come into her life as a lonely old man needing kindness, but he had given her far more than she had ever given him. He had shown her the true meaning of compassion, taught her about the dignity that comes with age and experience, and demonstrated that even in the face of devastating illness, the human spirit could still find ways to give generously to others. Most importantly, Mr. Henderson had helped Sarah understand that kindness was never wasted, that every small act of care and compassion created ripples that extended far beyond what anyone could see or imagine. His final gift ensured that their brief but meaningful friendship would continue to impact lives for generations to come, proving that love and kindness truly are the most powerful forces in the world.